Climate experts have warned that the UN's COP climate talks are no longer fit for purpose. They say countries should only be able to host the summit if they support the phase-out of fossil fuels. This year's COP, COP29, has been taking place in Azerbaijan, a country expanding gas production. And we have heard support for oil and gas from some officials at the summit in Azerbaijan. Let's get some reaction to this. Gareth Redmond-King is from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Thank you very much for joining us on LBC News. Do you echo these calls for the COP talks to not be hosted by countries that don't support the phase-out of fossil fuels?
I think there's a lot to be said for that, yes. And I think one of the other things that related to that is causing more of a problem is the fact that, as was revealed yesterday, there's 1,700 people, more than 1,700 people here who are lobbying for fossil fuel companies. If that was a delegation, they would be the third biggest delegation at the talks, and there are more of them than the 10 most climate vulnerable nations in the world. So, you know, they're here on just ordinary badges, wandering around the halls, involved in negotiations and trying to influence people involved in negotiations. That's kind of the bigger problem. But the fact that, the meeting is taking place in a country whose president came to the talks the other day and said that gas was a gift from God is not particularly helpful, but nor need it actually stop all the other countries who are here from reaching agreement over these 2 weeks.
I think the whole kind of reason why the COP summits have been set up in the way they have is because there needs to be collective action, doesn't there? There needs to be collection by countries around the world. How can these talks function if you have countries who aren't really on board with cutting fossil fuel use?
Well, we've had almost all of the countries of the world involved in these talks from the outset, and all of them signed up to the Paris Agreement in 2015. And if you think before we had this process at all, we were looking at being on track for something like 9 degrees of temperature rise over the course of this century, and now we're on track for more like 2.7 degrees of temperature rise. So that progress has been made, even with people in the room who don't particularly agree with it, don't particularly support it, and even still want to carry on selling fossil fuels in very high numbers. Because actually, as the vast majority of countries in the world have invested more in clean energy technology, the prices have come down, the market has grown, the bills have come down, jobs have been created by it, and so the market starts to pick up and drive this globally as well, as those leaders who are trying to push it out front. So it's not just about who is in the room who can say, no, I don't like this. They don't get a veto. And the fact that progress has been made over these last few years shows just how true that is.
There's a week to go, isn't there, of this current COP summit. So what do you think is going to come out of it at the end?
Well, it was very unwise towards the end of week 1 to try and predict what's going to come out of it at the end of week 2. And this is the point when we all start to worry that things don't seem to be moving at all. But come the weekend, ministers arrive from around the world. So the talks get political. Some of the things that are maybe less important perhaps get pushed to one side. And the big issues like finance for developing countries to be able to adapt to worsening ever more dangerous climate impacts, those come to the fore, and the talks get more political, and we'll really see what's going to happen as we get into next week. And maybe I'd be more inclined to give a prediction next week.
OK, we look forward to that then. We'll come back to you on that one. Gareth Redmond-King from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit.